Hi guys. So in this video, we'll be talking about prompting. Prompting is one of the most important things which we need to know if we are working with generative AI applications. A good prompt always directly influences the efficiency of any model. If the prompt is well defined, the efficiency of the model will increase and the model will output more better. A bad prompt would simply mean that the model's output is not up to the mark. So before moving on to the code, first we will look at what is a prompt actually. As you can see my screen, a prompt is a natural language request that is submitted to a language model to receive a response back. So basically, this means that we are hitting a prompt to a model so that we can get a response back. Now, prompts can contain multiple different things. Can be either a question, can be set of instructions, can be contextual information, some few short examples, etc. Now, as soon as the model receives a prompt, depending upon the type of model used, it is used to generate text or code, images, video, etc. So you can see this image over here. This is a basic architectural flow of how a prompt works. Above, you can see that the prompt is defined. The prompt can be either questions, instruction, contextual info, etc. These prompt instructions are given to the model. Whenever a user inputs any query, the user query will go to the model. The model is the blue bot which is present in the center. So the user query goes to the model. The model which is already trained on these prompt instructions will use this user query and it will start to think. Based upon the instructions given in the prompt, it will process the query and it will give an output. This output would be completely different from the output which is generated when we do not use any prompt. So this is the basic structure of a prompt. Now moving on to the next part. A typical prompt or a good prompt has four different parts. The first part being task. What do you mean by a task? A task is a text in the prompt that we want the model to provide response for. It's basically the question that the user asks or what instruction is given to the model. What is the LLM supposed to answer? So all these things come under the category of task. So you can see here in this prompt, we are asking the model, what are the colors in the rainbow? So basically, this is the task given to the model. The task is that the model has to know what is a rainbow. Then it needs to answer the question of what colors are being in the rainbow. The response of the model is rainbow has seven colors: red, orange, yellow, blue, so on so. So this is what a task is all about. This is a basic set of instruction that the model is supposed to give an output of. The second most important part of a prompt is the system instruction. So the system instructions are instructions which are given to the model before any actual user prompt is given. This will provide more instructions to the model on how to operate. We can specify or we can define a particular persona to the model. We can give a persona to the model. We can tell how the model is actually supposed to behave. This set of system instruction. For example, if you see this example over here, the system prompt being given as you are Captain so and so, the most feared pirate dog of the seven seas. So basically, you are instructing the model and saying it that you are a captain who is a pirate. So you are from the 1700s. You do not have knowledge of anything. So basically, you are setting up the model or giving a history to the model. So whenever you are going to ask any question to the model will now start to take that persona. In this case, being the captain itself. So we can see here when the user puts any question like "Hello, you, who might you be?" The response comes like "Avast here. You can call me Captain so and all these stuff." So basically, we have just trained the model, not actually trained the model. We have set up the system instruction and asked the model to behave as a pirate. So now the model is also going along with the flow. This is what a system instruction is. The next one is called as few shot example. Now, few short examples are examples that we include in a prompt to show the model what actually the output should be like. For example, in this prompt, you can see that there are multiple different names, and all the names, each of the names have been categorized into different wine. There are two different wine, which is red wine and white wine. So we want the model to now kind of predict what kind of wine it's is it either red wine or white wine. So we have given some examples to the model. Here we can see that there are three different examples given, each of which has a label name and label type. For example, we have carbonate, red wine, all those stuff. So whenever the user is going to now give the model some kind of wine name, like let us say this Riesling in this case, as you can see the response just comes as white wine because the model now sees the prompt. The prompt has already few short examples defined. So the model now knows that if the input is going to be present in such way, then the output also should be structured in a particular format, which is given by us. So this is what few short examples are all about. And the last one is the contextual information. Contextual information also plays a very important part. It is the information that we include in the prompt that the model is going to use while generating a response. Now, let us say that I am creating a model which wants to access information from the database. We want to give a part of the database to the model so that it will first know what is the content actually present. All this information is called as contextual information. For example, in this prompt, which you can see here, we have a database which contains two columns, marble color and marble number of marbles. So based on this context, we can ask the model different questions. In this case, we are asking the model, how many green marbles are there? So based on this context, the model is able to return it as there are 70 green marbles. Okay, now we'll start to see how prompting is done in LangChain. LangChain natively provides multiple different techniques for us to prompt. There are different ways. First thing that we are going to look at is called as ChatPromptTemplate. Now let me explain this to you with the help of the document itself as a reference. As you can see that this is the LangChain reference API docs, and this is what we are going to use to create a prompt. So chat prompt template is a kind of function, as you can see, which will help us to define our own prompts. So basically, you can see that the chat prompt template is a function which contains a list of different values. These list of values are nothing but the type of information that we are giving to the model. As you can see, first we have something called as a system. The system here refers to the system instructions that we are giving. In this case, we are giving the bot, we are saying the bot that you are a helpful AI bot and your name is something. Similarly, the next one is the human message. Human message is the message that the user is initially giving the bot. In this case, hello, how are you doing is the human message. AI message is the output that the bot is giving when a human enters any question. In this case, they have defined it as I'm doing well, thanks. And again, we have human message. So basically, this would create a type of message object which we will give to the model. Now we look in terms of code. If you can see here, first we are importing all the libraries normally. We are setting up the environment variables and loading the model as you can see. From the previous video, we have covered this all. So now we will go to coding. The first thing that we want to do is there are two different ways to use chat prompt template. So we'll be seeing both these ways. Let me just type chat prompt template. Okay, the first step is to first import the library. So we will be using something called as LangChain core. From LangChain underscore core dot prompts, we will be importing chat prompt template. The next thing is to create an object. Now, how will we create an object? Let me create a template object as template is equal to chat prompt template of. Now, inside this, we need to give a list as a parameter as we have seen in the docs. The first thing that we are going to do is to give the set of system instructions. Now let the system instruction be something as system Come on, let's say something as you are a helpful assistant. Introduce yourself as, let's give something like name. So this name is nothing but a placeholder which we will be giving the model when we are invoking the prompt template. So we have defined the system prompt. The next one we can define it as the human prompt. The human message would be termed as human, followed by what kind of questions that we want to ask the bot. In this case, I'm just going to put a placeholder called as input. So now basically what is happening is we have created a template. The template contains two prompt messages. First is the system instructions. We are telling the bot that it is a helpful assistant which is used to answer any query given by the user, and it has to introduce itself as some name. This name is configurable from the user point of view. The next thing we have is the human message. Human message is a message that we are going to give the bot. So now let me run this file. So we can see that we have created a template. Now let me show you how to use this template. We will create a variable called as prompt template is equal to template.invoke. Now what this invoke function does is that it will pass values through the template that we have defined over here. Here we have two different configurable parameters. One is name and the next one is input. So we need to give both name and input for the template to function properly. So this is what we'll be defining here. Inside invoke function takes argument in the form of a dictionary. The first thing that we have to define is name. Note that the key value pair should exactly correspond to the key which is present over here. So it is present as name. So we put name colon. Let me call this bot as something like info AI. You can give any name you want. The next thing we want to define is the input field which is present over here. So let me give the input as input, and tell me about Eiffel Tower. Can be any question. I'm just going with this one. So when I do this, the prompt template now has been defined. Now, how can we say that it has been defined? Let us print this prompt template. I'll just put print of prompt template. You can see here it returns a message which is a list. This list contains the system message. The system message is the one which we have defined over here. You are a helpful assistant. Introduce yourself as, and you can see info AI is present over here. Since we have passed the invoke AI as a parameter into the invoke function. Similarly, we can also see the human message content. The human message content would be tell me an Eiffel Tower. This is because we have passed it into the prompt template. Now we should use the LLM to invoke this prompt template. Now what can we do is we can create a response as response is equal to LLM dot invoke of prompt template. Now when I do this and when I print the response dot content, you can see that the entire content would be there. See, this is how the content would be displayed. Now the first thing you can see that is it starts the content by expressing itself and introducing itself as info A. This is because we have asked it to explicitly introduce itself with a given name. This is what a prompt is capable of doing. If you are not going to use this specific prompt, it will still say that it is chatbot and it is not info A. And hence steps we should follow while creating a prompt template. The first one is to import the chat prompt template. Inside the chat prompt template, we can define whatever kinds of messages that we want. It can be either a system message or human message or anything of that sort. The next step is to invoke the prompt template and pass in values into the template. The third step is to use an LLM and get the response. This is the first way of using chat prompt template. There are also other ways of using chat prompt template, which we will see now. Okay, now we are going to see the second way of using the prompt templates. Now let me type it something like way to. Yeah. In the second method, we are going to use a separate function which is defined in LangChain itself. I have already copied it. Let me give it to you. So this is how it is going to look. The format has changed now, as you can see. Earlier, we were using the chat prompt template function by passing a list into the function. Now it has changed to another function called as from_messages. The functionality is basically the same. The way of us calling the chat prompt template differs here. You can see that from_messages also expects a list which contains the same parameters like system and user. That is what we are giving over here. The same list can be given inside from_messages. So when I run this thing, you can see that if I print the prompt, see the same thing you can see. But however, this is a type of system message prompt template whose prompt has different input variables and whose template is the information that we are given inside. So let me create something like LLM prompt. This is basic LLM object. Now what we should actually do is we need to connect the prompt and the LLM together. This can be done by writing prompt followed by pipe symbol and LLM. Now what basically this does is it is connecting the prompt to the LLM object. LLM will be using the LLM object, the same LLM which is defined over here, that is Grok and Llama 3.18b instance. So basically what is happening is here the prompt and LLM are both connected to each other. So we are passing it through another object called as LLM prompt. Now we would need to get the response. For getting the response, we can put something like response is equal to. Now we should note that we'll not be using the LLM, but we should be using the LLM prompt that we have created. So LLM prompt dot invoke. Now while invoking, we should display the input. This is because, as you can see in this from_messages format, we have simply stated that there is a user message taking an input. So we'll be defining the input over here as input colon. I'll ask the same question. Tell me about Eiffel Tower. And then let's print the response. And there you go. This is how the second way operates. So the first way uses a built-in function chat prompt template directly, and we are invoking the prompt template to pass through the values like name and input. Then we are giving it to the model to invoke the prompt as such. In the second way, we are using a separate function called from_messages, which takes in its own user input. But instead of invoking the chat prompt template, we are ending it with the LLM, and then we are invoking the LLM prompt. And while invoking the LLM prompt, we are passing the input parameters as such and getting the response. Okay, now we'll be looking at the second way to use prompt. Now, instead of using LangChain's chat prompt template, we have another way of using prompt template in the form of strings. This is called as a prompt variable method. Now we'll be focusing on the prompt variable method. Now let me create a markdown and name it as prompt variable method. Okay. I've already defined a prompt over here. Okay, so immediately you can see the difference over here. We are not using any built-in functions like the chat prompt template, which you had defined before. Instead, it's just a string which contains a placeholder for input. Now let me execute this. The next step would be to ask a particular question. Right? Now let me frame some question. Yeah, something like question is equal to what is the capital? Yeah, we'll ask this question itself. What is the capital of France? Now we have defined the question and we have defined the prompt. the next step would be to place this question in the placeholder of the prompt so that we can get the total prompt. For that format, we'll be using something called as dot format method. I'll create a new variable called as formatted prompt. Formatted prompt is equal to, we need to format that prompt. So we'll write it as prompt dot format. So inside dot format, the input will be passed as an argument. This is because in the prompt, we want to paste this question. So we can write it as input is equal to question. So what this essentially will do is, it will paste this entire what is the capital of France inside this prompt. So if I print the formatted prompt, I'll print the formatted. So I printed, you can see this is the prompt. It has the question along with the question which we have defined over here. This is how you should format a prompt. So the prompt preparation is done over here. The next step is to invoke it using an LLM. This will be a normal invoke. So we'll get something like LLM prompt 2. We'll just name this LLM as LLM prompt 2. Unlike the chat prompt template method where we were trying to bind the LLM with the prompt, here we do not need to do so. We can just call the LLM and invoke it directly. So we can do something like LLM prompt 2 is equal to, prompt 2 response, it is as a response is equal to LLM dot invoke. Inside LLM dot invoke, we need to paste the formatted prompt. Formatted prompt. And we will print this content. This response content. When you print this, yes, you can see here. Bonjour, I am Info, your friendly knowledge assistant. The capital of France is Paris. So this is how we are using the prompt variable method. Unlike the traditional method of using chat prompt template, where we would need to specifically define the user message, system message, over here we can just use a simple format function to format a prompt, pass the prompt as an input parameter using format function, and then you can invoke the model. So this is the second way to call the prompt templates. So additionally, I would also like to talk about another important function which is used for parsing the output. It is completely optional, but however, it is a good practice to use that. It is called as output parsers. So let me name this section as StrOutput parser. So output parser is basically a function which would help us to pass through the model's output and print it in a more better way. So I'll write the code over here. So how basically this would look like is, we need to first import the parser. So LangChain itself has its own set of functions for parsing. So we can type something like from LangChain underscore core dot output parsers. We need to import something known as str output parser. As the name itself says, string output parser. It is used to pass through a string. There are also other types of parsers like JSON output parser, which is used to pass through a JSON output. So we need to first call this function parser. Let's name it as parser is equal to, call that function str output parser. So now we have created a parser object. The next step is to bind the parser object with the LLM. Just as the way we used to bind the prompt template with the LLM, we are also here binding the parser with the LLM. So we'll define another LLM like LLM parser. LLM parser would be LLM followed by the pipe symbol followed by parser. So now we have created a parser LLM. So we can now use this parser LLM to invoke any kind of question. Let us take something like response is equal to LLM parser dot invoke. Let us say something like uh, tell me about France. Now if I type this, you will get the response. Now while printing the response, since we are using the output parser, we do not need to type the content. Instead, we can just type print of response. This would be enough. So when I click response, print of response, you can see that This is how the entire output looks like. So str output parser is used to parse through the output and display it in a more better manner. Now, using all the things that we have learned here, we would try to create a simple model pipeline for calling a chatbot using this chat prompt template. Let me create a new section called as uh, terminal chatbot. Okay, so basically what should have is, let me copy paste. In the previous video, we had done the same exact thing, but with simple models. Here we have included the concept of chat prompt template too. So we have two different functions as you can see here. First function is used to create a model. The first function, as soon as it initializes the model, the next step is to first define the prompt template. The prompt template method that we are using is the first method. Then the next step is to bind the prompt template to the model, and this is going to return the model. This is exactly what we saw in the start of this video. The next function that we are going to define is the ask question function. The ask question function takes the question as an input and then gives out a response. And now let me run this pipeline. The next thing would be to create a loop which would print all the responses. So this would be the loop. So the first step we are doing is to create a model. Creation of model comes from this function. After creating the model, we are defining a question which takes input from the user. Unless and until the user types an exit, the loop will keep on running. And for each and every question, we are asking the question and printing the response. So when I start to run this, we'll have something like, hello, welcome to the Grok chatbot. Please enter your question below. That is being defined over here. Then let me say ask some question like who is on the, yeah, you can verify here that it is saying I am info A. Why is it saying I am info A? Because we have defined in the chat prompt template system instructions saying that introduce yourself as info A, and it gives information about Mahatma Gandhi and so on. So you keep on looping until you are going to type in exit. Once we type in exit, says thank you for using Grok chatbot and goodbye. So this is how we will create a terminal chatbot. So in this video, we have covered a lot of concepts, starting from what is a prompt, what are the different parts of the prompt, the architectural flow of the prompt, what do you mean by a task, what are system instructions, what are few short examples, what is contextual information and why do we need it, the different types of prompting that LangChain supports. The first one being chat prompt template, the two different ways in which we are using chat prompt template. Then we discussed about the prompt variable method, following which we discussed about StrOutputParser, and we also built a terminal chatbot using all the concepts that we have learned in this video. So that's all for this video. In the next video, we will be looking at a project where we'll be creating a chatbot with a dedicated front end and a dedicated prompt, which is not just a simple prompt like this, but will be a huge and better prompt. So I'll see you in the next video.